think maybe you should describe a bit about what hedging is, because I found this very interesting in the report.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, so hedging is, it's a kind of technical term for when you invest, which is, you'll invest in one thing, but you'll kind of do side bets to make sure you don't lose too much. And basically, the psychology of the hedging was, we're going to make money off of China, but we want to continue to get security from the US. And suddenly, the realization of how that was a real problem, how if you try to get money from China and security from the US, you're going to end up with no security and potentially not very much money at all. Because as China comes in and takes more control over your economic structures, it's very parasitic. It'll suck out your production capacity, your intellectual property, your talent, whatever it can. So that hedging has started to make a lot less sense. There's still countries that are very big on hedging, but it's getting harder and harder to do.
Is there a specific example you can think of a country that hedged and lost on both sides of that hedge?
So France has been like le roi de hedge. They've been like very big on hedging. They like to move in that middle zone, and in the roundtables, they would say things like, one of the guys said from the defense sector said, when we go into the region, our special quality is we have less political and military conditionality than the US, which means they'll sell better weapons to worse people than the US. Right? That's how they operate. And they were very concerned that as a division happened between the US and China, they would be pushed out of zones where they could be involved economically. For the French in the Indo-Pacific, it's infrastructure, energy, and defense. And that just happened in Myanmar. So the French energy company had to pull out of Myanmar because it became politically unviable for them to be operating in a country which had become so horrific so quickly. So that's a concrete example of how where that gray zone starts to disappear and it starts to become, yeah, that's evil, then certain countries have to pull out just because they can't justify it anymore domestically.
So what you're saying is there's a potential downside to investing in corrupt authoritarian regimes?
Apparently not according to the French, unless you get caught. So they got caught. Right?
Well, then that's the trick, is to just not get caught.
Mm. Yeah, and again, the French are, I learned a lot about the French because they're very implicated in the Indo-Pacific. They have territories in the Indian Ocean, territories in the Pacific Ocean. They have a lot of military assets in the region. And they're very careful about keeping a low profile. And their goal is to be considered a local actor, to be considered part of the Indo-Pacific so that they can help shape rules and norms. And they've done that in part by really trying to downplay their colonial history. So this is this thing about when you talk to countries about the different countries. So when we talk to France about the UK potentially coming back into the region, they were like, yeah, we don't really want that because the British will remind the region of the colonial period. And so then they'll suddenly remember that the French were, not so great during the colonial period. So if we associate with the British instead of associating with the Japanese directly or the Indians directly, it's a perception downside for us.
Mm. No, but go on. Is there any more things negative that you want to say about the French? Because it's an open platform for that.
I'm from Quebec, right? Like I have to go home.
But they don't like the Quebecois, right? So it's
correct. Yeah, that's right. So they don't like anyway. The French are really smart about this. I don't know what to say. They have a very advanced Indo-Pacific policy. They've been developing it for years. I mean, they've been working on space cooperation with the Indians since the 50s and 60s.
Well, not very successfully, right?
Pretty successfully, but also because of this conditionality thing. So they would share higher tech gear with the Indians than the Americans would, for example. And also, everybody knows the French are the French. So kind of the barrier, what's expected isn't as high. But if you want me to kind of say another thing about the French,
please.
And again, this has to do with kind of these triangular relationships. There was the Australians were looking to buy submarines, right, a while ago, and the Japanese were willing to sell them submarines, which would have been a very big deal for Japan. It would have been their first major foreign arms sale, and it would have really consolidated a Quad type relationship. And the French got in there and managed to get that submarine deal, that $50 billion submarine deal. At which point, the French defense minister at the time went to Australia and said, now we are married for 50 years, to which some Australians were saying, yeah, we know what French marriages are like,
Jeez.
That's always the problem of these three-way relationships with the French.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So if they limit it to 3, it could probably be handled. But anyway, so because France and Australia are actually neighbors, because New Caledonia shares a maritime border with Australia. So France is very active in the region. So there was sort of some degree of logic to work with the French there. But that I'm bringing that sale up because that's still a bit of a sore point within the Quad. The Japanese were still uncomfortable with the Australians not buying their subs. So technical things aside, financial things aside, that's why the report looked at perception, how people view each other, because that perception gap is where Chinese political warfare can get in and create the division. So making sure that countries understand how they're viewed by other countries so that those gaps aren't exploited by hostile third parties is very important.
Well, it seems like the fundamental issue was the gaps were exploited because different factions in all of these countries were willing to do business with an authoritarian regime because there was money in it. And in many cases, they thought the U.S. could just protect them.
Yes. And I think you kind of put your finger on the thing that really needs to be sorted out domestically in all of these countries before we can move forward in a stable way together. The amount of active online political warfare against any country that could potentially be a threat in any way to the PRC is enormous. I mean, we're talking millions of people, billions in budget. Like this is not, and it's not just online. When Fang Fang came into California via the student organizations, right? And takes control of the political organization that's linked to a campus and then distorts the discussion within the countries.
Fang Fang, the alleged spy.
The alleged spy, yeah, Christine. The amount of effort that's going in to hobble us even before we can get out of the gate is enormous. And we've talked about this before, that should be the job of the media. But the media isn't really, in all of these countries, it has the same problem, where money is coming in from the outside that can distort the coverage to a very large degree. So, yeah, we need to clean up our own houses. And then we're in a better position for the good guys, so to speak, in each of the countries to be able to find each other and work together in a comprehensive way. And China knows it. That's why it's creating our problems or helping to create our problems domestically so that we're less able to do that.